Hello, everybody, and welcome to the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we apply the practical philosophy of objectivism to current events. We've got a great panel here. The usual suspects, Marco and Richard, Robert Dacier. I think we will be joined by Jack Schumann shortly, and we're going to be talking about three topics as usual, folks. You know the rule of three in writing. Well, it applies to the show, too. The first topic is, I think our guys from the UK are going to probably want to take over some of the particulars of this, but Dan Wooten and Lawrence Fox have both been suspended from GB News over comments they made about journalist Ava Evans. They said the following. I want you guys to take this in and see what you think. That little woman has been fed, spoon-fed oppression day after day. We need powerful, strong, amazing women who make great points for themselves. We don't need these sort of feminist 4.0. They're pathetic and embarrassing. Who would want to shag that? Well, he certainly crossed the line with that one, folks. What do you think about this? What do you make of the comments? Is it right to conceptualize cancel culture as an example of free speech violation? That should be fruitful ground for us to talk about, folks. The next, also UK-centered issue. The Prime Minister over there is considering following New Zealand's example and making smoking illegal for younger generations. So if you were born from 2009 and before, I think they're trying to make smoking completely illegal for you. I see all kinds of problems with that, as I do when the government overextends its power and tries to get into our lives and tell us what to do and tell us how to be healthy. I wonder what our panelists will think. And then there's a final article in The Guardian Says the Darndest Things. Do you think there's such a thing as bot anarchy? Well, there's a writer in this article, Ellen Miles, who thinks there is such a thing as taking control of the common areas, the common ground that people live in the neighborhoods, and more or less deciding to beautify them through gardening. Is that good? What do you think about this article? If you guys have read it, I know our panel has read it and might have things to say about it. But let's start first with this canceling of these two characters on this this show that I'm not aware of, but you folks in the UK are. What do you make of this, and how does it relate to cancer culture now? Did Ava have any good points to make, and should it result in the firing or cancellation of these two guys? Marco and Richard, what say you?
Well, first of all, the comment that Lawrence Fox made about her being unshaggable is the fact that it's a result of a stupid banter between him and the presenter. Later on Twitter, he actually admitted that he should have turned down the, I think he called it bar talk rhetoric. Nevertheless, he was reacting to something that she said in a different program, I think the day before, where a guy who wrote a book about how to understand men, it was making the point that suicide among men is quite high. And is often ignored. And it was chiming an idea from somebody in the government who wanted to propose a ministry for men just to tackle this kind of issue. And the Siva woman, she was on the panel, and she effectively dismissed the whole thing, saying, "Oh, that's just effectively antagonizing women." And Lawrence Fox, when he was talking about her, reacted to her dismissiveness, to be honest, reacted to her being a bit misanthropist in a way, and
misandrist. I think that's the actual term for right, not liking men.
Bear in mind, Lawrence Fox used to be an actor. He comes from the Fox dynasty of actors. He was cancelled and effectively banned from working a few years ago when he made the point that women who, during the Me Too movement stuff, saying that women who say that they've been subjected to some sort of abuse should be listened to but not believed by default. And that was bad enough to cause him to be cancelled.
That sounds perfectly rational to me.
Yeah, well.
And to be honest, he went on to stand as a candidate for the Mayor of London in the last mayoral elections for London on a free speech platform. He's often someone who can stray into the crass when he's making a point, but also has a point a lot of the time as well. So he's both a good defender of a point and the worst defender of a point, depending on which element of it you choose to analyze. For example, he did burn a load of pride flags in his garden to make a point about how pride was super woke. But whether burning flags is ever the way to make any point ever is moot. Yes, and the point about GB News is that GB News is a 2-year-old channel that has really upset the establishment because it's showing the non-woke. It's a bit like our first example of a Fox News, really, isn't it? It's in many ways, it's the first time that the non-left have had a news channel that is often not always right, so it's often as wrong as Fox News is, but it's presenting a different end of the spectrum that was never shown before. So the BBC, Channel 4, they all had the total monopoly on the ideas, the culture, the message being shown to the country, and they absolutely hate this channel for it daring to exist. So that is a big part of this story.
So the legacy left media has an interest in sowing chaos in this network.
Yeah, I mean, the legacy left media have been actively campaigning to stop advertisers from advertising on GB News, to try and stop their revenue and make them go bust. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to claim that this story is enough to persuade MPs not to appear on the channel at all. Members of Parliament shouldn't appear on the channel because it's such a I was going to say a persona non grata, whatever the equivalent of that is for a channel. But yes.
Oh, so you don't get invited to all the fancy cocktail parties that the left are throwing, and so you want to be a part of that inside group. It's so high school, some of this stuff, it's high level, but ultimately it comes down to wanting to be in the in group, and nobody wants you in the in group. I mean, I'm just appalled by this kind of stuff. Robert, what say you about this stuff going across the pond?
It's as Marco and Richard have pointed out, this is Great Britain's finally catching up. They finally got their own Fox News. The coincidence of this former actor being named Fox just makes it perfect. We who are for free markets, who are for capitalism, leave me the hell alone. We are the ones who say, well, if you don't like what somebody's doing, don't try to pass a law, just boycott it. Just don't deal with them. Well, that's what's going on here. Now, there is a whole cancel culture reaction outside of GB News. Well, what's the difference between cancel culture and boycott? The difference is cancel culture uses culture and modern technology, the internet, to try to completely wipe people out, not just to not deal with them, but to destroy them. Otherwise, cancel culture is just, we don't like somebody, we cancel our subscription. We don't go to their store anymore. We don't turn on that news channel during that hour this guy is on. So I have no problem with GB News saying, we're a news program, and somebody's buttressing their argument with a comment like, I wouldn't shag her. I wouldn't screw that person. He said more than just who would want to shag that. He went on. You can agree with that. You can not agree with that. You can say we need that kind of provocative banter, that locker room or barroom talk in order to counter the left. You can argue that. But what you can't say is, well, GB is just giving into cancel culture. I don't believe that for a moment. Should the show have been suspended? Should Fox have been canceled from the channel altogether? You could argue that. But no, I think that it's kind of a both sides wrong, but I support GB News in this decision. Is there anything, if you want to say, well, damn it, we've got to fight the left. Is there anything that somebody could say on GB News where you would say, oh, yeah, that's not cool. That crosses a line. We don't want any of that.
Yeah. Not to mention that GB News is actually a private company, unlike the BBC. So it's perfectly legitimate for them to say, well, you crossed the line, we don't like you anymore, so you're out. Now, if they gave him a contract that say you can say what you like, we're going to be behind you, that's a different issue. It's between him and the company itself. But I don't see any problem in GB News kicking out whomever they choose to kick out. It's a different issue on the BBC and some public sector environment, really, whatever that is.
And one of the things that's definitely happening at the moment is they're instantly setting the dogs of Ofcom, the regulator, on GB News at the first opportunity. Things that take ages to be fed towards the regulator when it's on the BBC or Channel 4 seem to be in the Ofcom's in tray within moments if it's on GP News. So there's certainly a double standard from the government approach to complaints.
Well, yeah, that's scary. Oh, you wanted to say something, Robert? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're absolutely right, and I hope I made clear that I don't support the cancel culture reaction to this. In fact, I even get the reactionaries who say, well, we got to support this guy no matter what because of this leftist Leviathan that we're up against. But to me, that's the exact opposite reaction. I get it. I have that emotional reaction myself. But no, it just tells me we have got to be that much sharper, that much better, that much classier if we are going to be able to respond in a strong way.
Let me push back on that. Let me push back on that a little bit,
Please.
Robert. I mean, if you're in a street fight with somebody and they think they can kick you in the nuts and gouge you in the eyes and pull your ears off, and you're just playing Marcus of Queensberry rules, you are going to lose.
Right. But I don't think that's what happens in a cultural context like this, like television news. I know there are people who love raw meat and they will be all for no matter how dirty we get, but that's not how we win this battle. It might be how we win this fight. It's definitely not how we win this battle. We've got we don't have to take the high road and be morally better than them. We have to be actually better than them.
I think we've seen that actually play out in America too. We saw the Republicans, quote unquote, taking the high road, but with no philosophical ammunition. The left runs roughshod over them. We see the right taking the low road with Trump, and they've lost the culture war even more. I mean, there's certainly people have entrenched more deeply in their tribal, their tribal allegiances, but he certainly hasn't won the battle, and he certainly hasn't won the war by being crass. And I discovered that, in my own communications with people, the harsher I am with harsh people against me, the less gravitas I have in the eyes of others, even though I think I'm giving somebody back what they deserve, or even less than what they deserve. They deserve a slap in the mouth, but I give them less than that. And I give them something sardonic or playfully, mean, and I diminish my argument in the meantime in the eyes of other people who are just sitting on the sidelines. Now, it sucks that some people can get away with that kind of evil and other people can't. But if you stand on the side of virtue, you got to be on the side of virtue all the way.
I'm just going to amplify that by saying, if I could give just one example, people will say, well, what Trump did in 2016 worked. He took what would have been a great president before he completely bowed. Maybe he wouldn't have been great because he had this in him. Somebody like Ted Cruz. Imagine if Ted Cruz had been president for those 4 years. But go back even further, because you say, well, we need somebody who fights. That's the world we live in. Ronald Reagan fought, and Ronald Reagan won. It can be done with stature, with respect for the office, with respect on the news programs for your position. Just because we don't see it done that way as much as we want, and so we think, well, maybe we've got to be, scrappy fighters. And sometimes you do. No, it can be done like a Reagan. It can be done like a statesman, or it can be done like a proper journalist. And you're not doing your argument any favors if part of your argument is, well, I wouldn't screw that woman. What?
I know, but I feel like this is sort of like we're seeing the end of a snowball effect. I mean, cultures become anti-philosophical and irrational. It's lowered the discourse, particularly in a realm like politics that should be elevated, where people should be dealing with principles. They no longer deal with that. It's all about feels. It's all about showing how down you are with the constituency you want to throw red meat to. And in the case, and our expectations have lowered on a cultural and social level as well. So we sort of anticipate this kind of locker talk in a public forum, where you say something humiliating and stupid about a woman when you can address her arguments. As I saw part of that conversation, by the way, the guy had really good points to make. And actually, she had good points to make. Now, I don't think that the government should be involved in anybody's mental health. They shouldn't be involved in health at all. But, she was trying to say that mental health is an issue overall. Why single out men? But he had very good points that men are, in fact, ignored as beings with distinct issues. And part of the reason these issues are resulting in epidemic suicides and addiction is because they are ignored by our society. It's as if men shouldn't feel anything. And men are responsible for everything. They get paradoxical messages coming at them from everywhere. And I think it's important for us to understand that men and women deal with these things differently because we're different. And that's the point he was trying to make. And she made some valid points too. There was nothing, I mean, I didn't see the whole conversation, but there didn't seem to be anything offensive in what she said to me. I mean, maybe it was tribalistic. Maybe it was, a feminist has to be sort of tribalistic. She's taking a woman's side over a man's side every time and trying to leverage that. But did you see anything particularly, I mean, worthy of that kind of comment from Fox?
It was all about her being dismissive. And Fox has made the point, well, I've known guys who killed themselves. So if you're being dismissive about the men's mental health, then that's an attack on me. And therefore he was lashing out, fighting back. Again, I understand why he did what he did, but this guy, he's not an idiot. If you've seen him talk, you know Fox is not an idiot, but he's acting like an idiot. And so he deserves the chops he's getting for it. What she said was dismissive, and that's not good, but that's not at the level we're talking about that Fox wanted to take it to.
And I think
you're right. It was a reasonable conversation. Even if she was wrong, it was a reasonable conversation, and this was not that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason she was dismissive about the mental health thing was, for a moment, she and women were being pushed off of the victim podium. And so she was desperate to climb back on again and claim her place. And that was what riled her up initially. But yes.
Yeah, also, I don't know whether there was a history between the two of them, because I think he also posted a list of tweets posts where she actually uses the word in reply to other people. I wouldn't shag you. I wouldn't shag you, pal. I will shag you, mate. So she uses that kind of attitude a number of times. So I don't know whether he was trying to chime and repeat exactly what the kind of attitude she used. But I mean, the problem with these guys, these lefties, they are so laughable in terms of what they stand for, that you don't really need to go down the route of being offensive. Because, for example, she retweeted an image of our prime minister in a made-up picture where he's wearing a Nazi uniform about an issue about banning dangerous dogs or something like that. I mean, she retweeted that. So he could have easily picked her up on that particular issue, which is much more meaningful than making a stupid piece of banter. And as Robert said, we have to be a bit leaner and be tidier in the way we react to these people, because these people are roughly working on a perceptual level. So they see something, they lash out straight away. They don't stop and think and make the argument against. They just lash out. In a way, the best way to deal with them is just to ignore them. I mean, in a way, they're a bit like Q in the fountainhead. They want to recognize how their evil genius is so clever and good. If you just ignore them, they're going to stew in the corner and eat their own livers.
But sadly, that's not happening, because even a female Tory MP has come out already, a female Conservative MP, and said the whole channel should be cancelled as a result of this.
Oh my God, these people! Sticking their fingers up in the air, seeing which way the wind is blowing. What will make them more popular and esteemed in the public's eyes? It makes me want to vomit. But I got to tell you, I'm a little pissed at Ava for not wanting to shag me potentially, and I think she should be canceled for that. By the way, since she's using that language, and she used it first. Look, I think the antidote to misandry is not misogyny; it's individualism, and the antidote to victimology is not to get on the victim bandwagon and try to gain sanctions for your victimhood, but to be an individualist and shun the whole victim narrative altogether, because you aren't a victim. You aren't a victim. Well, folks, this has distressed me more than I thought it would. So
maybe a cigarette.
I think I need a cigarette, and luckily I'm old enough to get one. Yeah, I think you're right that the company has a right to do what they want to do with these people. They have a right to set their own standards, and the government should just shut the hell up and get the heck out of it and stop trying to use this as political red meat to advance their own power agendas and their own narratives. Jeff Bannister gives us $3 Canadian. Thank you, sir. I don't know how much that is in American, but we'll take it. Thank you for helping us out. So now the next topic really sort of frosts me, guys, that your prime minister wants to outlaw cigarettes for kids under a certain age, because I guess he wants the whole thing banned entirely. Now I see disaster after disaster after disaster happening here in New York. way back when, they put a tax on cigarettes. It's so expensive that it costs $20-25 for a pack of cigarettes. It started a black market in cigarettes, which has actually resulted in the deaths of some people, some of whom were making a living selling black market cigarettes. One guy was choked to death by 5 police officers who accosted him on the street because he was selling cigarettes illegally. I mean, of course, when they start bans of this kind, it opens up black market violence and subjects these young kids to this kind of thing. But do they even? I mean, I guess when you have an NHS, when the government is taking over your moral agency for your health, you got to just shut up and take it, because you've given them moral agency over your health, and they're going to try to assert that control wherever they can. Me as an American, and you guys as objectivists, even fish out of water over there in the UK, you've got to feel some sense of real violation here, that this is a total overstep of government. What say you?
Yeah, well, prohibition always works, doesn't it? It never leads to black markets and criminality, does it? Unless this is an attempt to promote entrepreneurship by the back door, I can't see it's anything other than ludicrous. At the moment, you have to be 18 to buy a packet of cigarettes in the UK. Now, if we're talking about somebody born in 2009, then effectively they'd have to get to 2027 before the first person would be a day over 18 and still not able to buy cigarettes. So this is already slightly in the long grass and is likely not to happen at all, or to happen in the way they're saying. But this smacks of a government and a prime random anything from anywhere.
Than in New Zealand. I mean, it means that you really reached the scraping the bottom of the barrel right now, because this is probably just election hearing anyway. We have an election next year, so I think all this crazy idea are just proposal that political advisors are coming up with, not least because we have quite strong anti-discrimination laws here in Britain. So to come up with a law that discriminates on age after 18, I think it's going to be quite hard to enforce in the first place. So to me, just Bostros attempted to play to the audience, to be honest.
Yeah.
What do you think, Robert?
I would have thought it was impossible, but I went to the home improvement store recently to buy light bulbs, and I can't buy incandescent light bulbs because the government is responsible for the energy industry. They subsidize them, so they have a say in saying, oh yeah, you shouldn't have that because it's bad for us as a society. So of course, if the NHS exists, if Canada's socialized medical system exists, if they've got that in New Zealand, well, the government has to have a say in you doing things that are going to make you unhealthy or shorten your lifespan. I don't know what the solution to that is. I loathe and despise cigarettes. I had parents who smoked. And yet I fought against the smoking bans in Michigan when they wanted the cigarettes out of the bars and restaurants. Now you have to go to see a hooker. No, it was a hookah lounge in order to smoke cigarettes in Michigan, because you can't do it in a bar. How can you smoke cigarettes in a bar? Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's been on my mind. So I have fought against these bans, even though cigarettes still make me cringe. And I'm kind of surprised in 2023 that anybody still smokes cigarettes. But they absolutely should have that. By what right do you tell anybody what they can and can't do in regard to something like smoking a freaking cigarette? And of course, it's sales of cigarettes. We're not telling you what you can, but it's the same thing with light bulbs. I can buy any light bulb I want. You can go to Amazon incidentally and buy incandescent lights. There are workarounds. Will there be workarounds for kids to buy cigarettes? Oh, hell yeah. There always were. When I was a kid, kids couldn't buy cigarettes. People will find a way. But this idea that you cut some people off after a particular year for life, people should be marching in the streets, and hopefully some people are.
Look, I hate cigarettes too, despise them. I got my mother to quit. She still died from lung cancer at 56. I tried to get my grandfather to quit. He wouldn't. He enjoyed it too much, so he said, but he also died from cancer. I have terrible personal experiences with cigarettes. I hate them. But yet when California started their law against smoking in bars, I smoked a cigarette in a bar that allowed it, just as a protest for private property and the right for the bar owner to proclaim their own standards Because look, if you don't like a non-smoke, if you don't like a smoking bar or a smoking establishment, get the fuck out. Don't solicit their services. Go somewhere else. You're perfectly free to. Yeah, I hate this kind of stuff. Even if I agree that young kids shouldn't smoke, teenagers shouldn't smoke, adults shouldn't smoke, old people shouldn't smoke. It's still your life, man. But this is what you get, right? When you give your moral agency to somebody else, when you give the responsibility for your health care to somebody else, they pay, they control. I mean, why aren't you guys in the UK? You guys know it, Richard and Marco, but why doesn't the UK get this? Why aren't there protests in the street?
Because we're apathetic and lazy, and we're watching it happen before our eyes. And already COVID showed that to a large measure of how much you could repress the people and have them sit at home and take it quite happily. And if you cushion their sitting at home, then they're not going to. If they've got full bellies, they're not going to revolt or do anything about it. But
or if you say that staying at home like that, like the COVID lockdowns, is in the public interest, it's for the common good, you get people actually raging at anybody who dissents. They become complicitous in the government lockdown.
Yeah, because if your only way of deciding what's good or bad, you've got to have the freedom to make bad decisions as well as good ones. It's partly how you learn. If your only way of deciding what's good or bad is what the government tells you is good, then you're going to be in favor of lockdowns. And before long, all you are going to be is a good little Nazi.
Yeah, if I could say something in defense of your UK compatriots, they may be lazy and apathetic, but it's because they're philosophically and especially morally disarmed. They may not agree with this, but they're, well, in principle, I guess it's right. That's why we have the ARCUK UK. That's why this fight is what it is. It's a battle of ideas. It's not just about people want to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, definitely.
That's right. Fundamentally, it comes down to, is your life your own? And we can discuss parameters that the government should protect with respect to that individualistic philosophy. Is your life your own? And with that guiding principle, let's constrain government, let's constrain our own behaviors in public as well with that principle in mind. And I think we'd have a much happier, freer place where your life and responsibility for your life is in your hands, as it should be. But so many people are afraid of that. So many people don't want that. So many people think it's not their responsibility to live their lives. And one of the reasons I think objectivism makes less headway in the world is because it's the road less traveled. It doesn't offer the magic pill that faith institutions do, or religions do, or some of the self-help movements do. It's about being rational about every aspect of your life, which, you know what? It's work. It's hard. It's hard, but it's good hard, in that it feels good to know that you are dealing with reality and being efficacious in reality. You might not get that immediately when you start following principles of reason, but you will get that in the long term if you stick with it. So we have a super chat here. Tom Kozial, I think, remember 14 months. If ideas are primary, stick to presenting the ideas to move individuals to a better culture. Name calling, etc., is self-defeating. Oh, but it feels so good sometimes. So guys, The Guardian says the darndest things. There's an article by this Ellen Miles about sort of anarchic principle with common property, where you just go and you just build a garden in a place because, after all, you're beautifying a place and it makes everybody happy. It's healthy for the city, it's healthy for the human beings, aesthetically, and in other ways. Do you agree with this person? Do you agree with that this is an expression of anarchy, like in its highest philosophical sense? There's a paradox there, of course. Marcos and Richard, what do you guys think?
Well, as I read this article, I was quite worried, because for the first couple of lines, I agreed entirely, in the sense that, you know, going out there and beautifying places is actually quite good. And I was like, oh my God. But then the real Marxist came out, and she actually made the point that doing that is the gateway to anarchy and therefore Marxism. And then I felt like, yeah, I'm reading The Guardian. So, well, to be fair, it's stuff that we've done. But our purpose was never to create an army of the workers and overtake the nasty capitalism. What did she say? The liberal capitalist state. That was never our intention. All we wanted to make their or we live a bit nicer and have a bit of fun in the process. These people are so sad in the sense that in order to get any kind of kick, any kind of self-worth in a sense, they need to show everyone and be told by everyone how good they are when they do something. They couldn't just go out and do it and not bother anyone else. They had to be telling everybody that they're doing it. And we ought to say, oh, you're so good, we're going to follow your politics. No, because it's crap. You and your anarchy, disappear, please. We don't need you.
Yeah, I think the line she uses in the article is, guerrilla gardening is the Trojan horse into anarchist ideals. We just saw it as having a few leftover plants, and there's a bit of soil that's public, that's in the public area that we could shove them in, and if they survived, it would look better, and if they didn't, it wouldn't. And we get a bit of commentary on the plants. Sometimes people throw beers and cans at them, but so hey, you can't win them all. But we also planted some plants in some private land. But what we did there is the obvious thing. We spoke to the owner of the private land first, said, would you mind if we put some nice plants in here as it's looking a bit empty and drab? And they said, sure, if you're prepared to look after them. We said, that's fine. And now it looks lovely. So, everyone's a winner.
Nice. Robert, what do you make of this? Because, I see it as at least a step up from the tragedy of the commons, right? Public property, usually nobody owns it, so everybody mistreats it and abuses it. But this is sort of the opposite perspective. I don't see it as the road to anarchy. I see it as just a nice gesture, if that's all it is.
Yeah, I almost wish Jonathan Honig was here, because he would straighten me out. This is another one of those stories that I read and I think, well, Ellen Miles, this so-called botanical anarchist, she's doing the wrong thing. She's going on public spaces and doing gardening. And as Marco and Richard point out, she's done this with private properties too, but she gets permission. In public spaces, well, people make the claim it's our spaces. Yeah, we should be able to what? Clean it up. If you went out to a public park, picked up all the trash, nobody would hold that against you. Well, how about if you plant a few plants because it's looking pretty bleak? Well, but the point is, in all the areas in which we are going to roll things back to get back to free markets and a capitalist system, just like some people will say, this is going to be the last thing this will be the last thing I will fight, is Ellen Miles and her botanarchy. You're right. You can't just let people go on public spaces and say, here's how I think it should look, and I'm going to modify it and change it. You just can't let people do that. Reminds me of a totally different subject, when the Nazis were marching in Skokie, Illinois. And they said, we have a right to march because other people have a right to their free speech. Ayn Rand was asked about that, and she said, well, then they have that right. But I would have denied both sides. You can't block public spaces, etc. So I do think that Ellen Miles and the other botanarchists, they shouldn't be on public property, digging up the soil and making things beautiful. You can't do that, because you can't just make it anarchy. Who knows what the next guy is going to do, which he thinks is beautiful. I only cringe. But again, if Jonathan Honig was here, he would condemn her much more roundly than I am. I know that I should, but I found it a really charming story. And when I'm fixing society, when I'm in charge, she's going to be the last one that I throw out. I'll throw her out, but she's going to be the last issue I get to.
So I feel like I'm a little too soft-hearted, because I don't mind her cleaning up the area and planting stuff in there. If the people we pay to do that stuff aren't going to do it, if the neighbors aren't going to do it, they're not going to take care of that area because it's public space and belongs to everybody, then I don't have a problem with her. But Richard, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that the councils are doing exactly that as well. So she's not exactly going against the system. She's following the collectivized system that we've got. Because at the moment, all the councils in London are digging up people's parking spaces in the street just outside their homes, putting trees and plants in them so that the bees can have a route to fly along so they can get all the way along a corridor of flowers to the nearest park. And never mind that everybody's gardens, everybody's back gardens are all green and all joined together. And a bee doesn't know the difference between a line of back gardens and a line of public gardens out the front that are really just about getting rid of people's cars. So for you to be a rebel, you have to be going against the system. For you to be an anarchist, you have to be going against the system, not doing what the Labour councillors want you to do anyway.
Yeah, and she seems to want to address the injustice of people not having their own private garden. It's like, well, I'm sorry, there is such a thing as making an effort, saving money, and buy a property if you're really interested in a garden. I mean, this stuff. What does it mean, injustice? Injustice for what? Should everybody have a garden? I mean, come on, this is just Marxism going crazy.
I mean, thank God it's funny as hell. I mean, these stories are so absurd. I'm surprised that they're stories and that anybody takes them seriously. But unfortunately, we live in times where we have to take this crap seriously, because people like that are seen as rebels when they're the biggest conformists of all. And it's just sort of reminds me of the Apollo Dionysus thing with Rand, where she was the only one really to point out, as far as I know, that the hippie movement and that protest movement were the biggest conformists of all. Because we tend to think of them as real rebels, and they weren't. They were accepting everything their parents told them was right. They just did it more consistently. And I think this girl is as well. You make some great points there, guys. Well, any final comments before we bid folks adieu today with respect to the, this is sort of off point. It's not sort of off point. It's really off point. But I want to ask you guys: did you see the Republican debates? Do you have any impressions about the Republican debates? It's probably going to be a topic later on in the week, I'm sure. But any comments, questions, concerns, or did you just tune it out completely?
Yeah, I totally evaded it. I read the news stories afterwards, and I'm glad that Nikki Haley did well. But no, I still need to watch it. And I think Nikki Haley is maybe the only person on that stage I could actually bring myself to vote for.
That's interesting. We should have a panel about the various people now and still in contention on the Republican side, and see what objectivists think where they come down on this. Marco, Richard, did you see it or did you evade it as well?
I think we were busy planting out things in the garden, to be honest. So no, we didn't see it. We were growing something that's going to last longer.
That makes sense. Very good. I didn't see it as well. Just little snippets here and there, unfortunately, and I didn't like what I saw mostly. Ashley shrugged, $1.99. Plants are nice. She's a fruit bat, but harmless. Fruit bats are cute, I have to say. So anyway, guys, upcoming shows, 10 p.m. UK time, Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir on Do They Want to Live? What is that? What is that?
You know, you get this a lot with young objectivists. They read Atlas Shrugged. They read that question that comes up repeatedly. The question of, do the Jim Taggarts of the world, the Wesley Mouches, do these people even want to live? John Galt, shouldn't give any spoilers. Somebody in the book tells her that's the last question that she's going to have to answer before she decides what to do with her future. And it comes up across Ayn Rand's writing, this death premise, the premise of death that is behind the actions of evaders and even drifters, people who choose not to focus versus those who shut it off. Do they really want to live, though? You know, most evil people don't kill themselves. They don't off themselves. They just want to destroy you. So we're going to look at that, figure out what that means, and what the value for each of us is in understanding, here's what evil does, here's what evil wants, and here's what they would do if they were at their wits' end and they had to choose either be virtuous or watch yourself fall apart and eventually perish. So should be an interesting episode.
I think this sounds very timely, something that we really need to hear today, folks. So make sure you tune in. If you like this content, like and subscribe. Make sure you spread it around. People need rational philosophy. And while you're doing that, while you're waiting for Robert and Amy to show up and talk about this very interesting topic, do me a favor, check your premises. Peace.